Zooey Mama, how's it going, everybody? I'm here today to talk about the new season pass card for July. I am talking about Gwenpool. Okay, we have the new season starting right on July 9th. Gwenpool is the featured card. She's a 4-cost, 6-powered card with the on-reveal ability to pick a random card in your hand 3 times and give that card plus 2 power each time. Now, just heads up, this is still technically data mined. Secondary is also on vacation, so we may not actually have the official season announcement video until maybe the day before or the day of. I don't really know. I'm not going to wait forever to make this video and give my thoughts on Gwenpool. But the understanding is that she's going to pick a card. It could be the same card 3 times. It could be 3 separate cards. It could be the same card twice, and then a third card, and she gives it plus 2 power. Okay, so total she's adding plus 6 power one way or another, whether that's plus 2, plus 4, plus 6 to a single card, or it's all spread out. But I'm going to go into detail of what I believe will be Gwenpool's best synergies, her counters, you know, the good, the bad, the ugly. I'll give you 3 deck ideas that you can try out right away when Gwenpool is released, and then I'll just give my final thoughts and ratings for this card, and if I think she's going to be a buy and worth the resources, or if she might be a bit of a bust. So let's get into it. So to talk about Gwenpool's key synergies, we are looking at cards like Sebastian Shaw. If he is in your hand and Gwenpool hits him with the plus 2, well, he's getting plus 4 because he gives himself an extra plus 2, whether he's on the board, in your hand, or in your deck. If you get extra lucky and Gwenpool hits him twice or 3 times, that's going to be, you know, an extra 4 or 6 you're getting from Sebastian Shaw. So there could be really big value there. A card like Makari seems random, but something I learned from Glazer of Snap Judgment before Makari came out, you know, really good talking point is that she empties your hand, right? Makari plays herself, so you have 1 less card in your hand. Normally, that's kind of bad, but if you're trying to have less cards in your hand, so Gwenpool hits specific cards you want, like maybe a Sebastian Shaw, then that could be really good, okay? Because it is random which cards in your hand she hits, but if your hand only has 1 card, she's hitting that 1 card or 3 times, guaranteed. Last up, we've got a card like Galactus. Now, I'm not sure there's much merit to this one yet, but it is an interesting thought as Second Dinner is adding in more of these hand buff cards, deck buff cards, right? We just got Fastos like 2 weeks ago, where if you can just power up a bunch of cards in your hand and deck a lot, and you can get a Galactus that just has huge power, maybe you can just solo Galactus on, you know, like turn 6. You don't even maybe need to play all the goblins or have it be super obvious. You just drop a Galactus and win. I mean, if you can buff him up enough, that could just be a free win. It could just pop off, you know. So I don't think we're to that point yet, but maybe at some point in the future when there's a bit more synergy for it. And then 2 locations that I thought were notable to mention are Carmitage. That's just great for on reveals. So if you do get lucky and have Carmitage with Gwenpool, she's going to pop off a lot. And then Muir Island doesn't synergize with Gwenpool directly, but they like a lot of the same cards, right? If you are playing the Sebastian Shaw, or maybe you're playing Brood or Mysterio, which are also just great targets for Gwenpool. They're cards that get extra buffs when you buff them in your hand, like Shaw. They like Muir Island, okay? They like just slapping down, get a bunch of cards there, get extra power, so that could be a nice location too. Now to talk about some counter cards that you might run into when playing Gwenpool. First up is the obvious, we got Cosmo. Okay, yes, Gwenpool is a non-reveal card. Cosmo stops on reveals. They're probably not coming down the same time. You know, he is a 3-cost card. You're playing Gwenpool on 4 at the earliest. So this shouldn't be too much of an issue, but it's worth mentioning. What's a bigger issue, I think, is discard. Okay, if your opponent has something like Black Bolt or Silver Samurai or Moon Knight, and they can make you discard some of these cards that you buffed up, that is a huge loss. When you play Gwenpool, she's only a 4/6 to start. You're essentially storing the extra value, that extra power in your hand to get on the board later, right? It's like you're investing for a later turn. Well, if you get cards discarded, you just lost your investment, and that kind of sucks. And then lastly, something like Korg or Rock Slide, where they're shuffling rocks into your deck. If your hand has rocks in it, or maybe they even played Black Widow and stunted a draw, and you have the Widow's Bite in your hand, then getting +2 power on a rock doesn't feel all that great. It's definitely not the target you're wanting to hit the most. So, stuff that messes with your hand is going to hurt a bit. Now to jump into the good and the bad for Gwenpool. For the good, well, she's possibly a 410 or 412. Okay, she starts off as a 4-6, as I mentioned. She's given +2 power 3 times, whether it's 3 completely separate targets or shared targets. So that's an extra +6 power. You do have to play it to the board to realize that power. But if that happens, she's going to be a 410 or 412 that doesn't die to Shang-Chi, right? Gwenpool herself is staying 6 power. The power extra that she gives, it's spread out. It's spread out over different cards, potentially different lanes. It cannot be hit like Shang-Chi, whereas a 410 like Call Obsidian or Crossbones, they just die to Shang-Chi. Okay, so that's really interesting. That power spread is nice. You can target specific cards with hand manipulation, like I mentioned, right? The smaller your hand is, the better the odds that she hits the cards that you want. So there's ways to kind of play around it. The delayed power reveal, again, you're making this investment of power for maybe turn 5 and or turn 6. And so that might throw your opponents off guard, right? They're not expecting a Sebastian Shaw maybe to drop as a 3-8 already. Maybe you're dropping a Gladiator that's like 310 or 312. I mean, you might just come out with really big power at the end. She's easier to play initially than Call Obsidian or Crossbones. Call Obsidian, you have to plan a lane where there's a 1-cost card. Crossbones, you need to be winning the location that you play him. Gwenpool, you just play on turn 4. It's that simple. You just play on turn 4, but then it's on you to play the card she powered up to actually reach the power level of Call Obsidian or Crossbones. But you can play her any location, any turn. And then, again, we got this hand buff archetype, question mark. I mean, it only takes one final piece of the puzzle to make a full kind of archetype or new deck style. We saw Baron Zemo do this when he was introduced, and now all of a sudden mill decks are a thing. Okay, so you might have this hand buff / deck buff archetype be a thing. Is it good is a different question. But again, you get enough cards with the same theme, and you have a full theme deck, so that's very interesting. Now to talk about the bad, I'm going to start off with something seen on my last video when I talked about the new season as a whole, and I told people I'm not really seeing it with Gwenpool. Like, what am I missing? What combo am I missing? Please tell me. And a couple people told me in the comments, they all said the same thing, and I think it's a trap. Okay, so I'm not calling you out to be mean if this was you. People mentioned Wong. They said, oh, I'm going to play Gwenpool with Wong. Now listen, if you're hearing any fireworks in the background, it's because as I'm filming this, it is currently the night of July 4th, okay? American Independence Day. And so while I talk about why this Wong thing may be a trap, it reminds me of the classic John F. Kennedy quote, "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country." Now this may seem random, but this is very applicable to new cards in Marvel Snap, okay? Ask not what existing cards can do for Gwenpool. Ask what Gwenpool can do for existing cards and existing decks or archetypes, okay? Yes, if you want to get more value out of Gwenpool, you could play her with Wong, and that way you play her after Wong, and she gives an extra +6. But if you start with Wong, if you look at any deck that has Wong in it and you ask the question, would I put Gwenpool in here? Would that make it better? The answer is no, okay? Wong does not want Gwenpool. Even if Gwenpool might like Wong, Wong doesn't like Gwenpool. Wong wants Namora, right? You play Wong on 4, maybe Namora on 5. That adds +10 power. You add White Tiger on 5. That adds +8, and it's on curve. You can play Wong with Ironheart. That's +6 to cards already on the board. You do it with Surfer, Gambit, Hazmat, Odin. Wong has so many better targets. He is a setup card, and you play him with a card that executes and adds power immediately, like Namora, Surfer, all the cards I mentioned. Gwenpool is a setup card. Okay, you're not going to play Wong, who's a setup card, and then play Gwenpool on Wong, which is another setup card to buff your hand. That's too much setting up. You're not actually adding anything to the board. So do not play her with Wong. Okay, now if you have a different combo with Gwenpool that I have not thought of still and you're not going to see in any of my decks here, let me know in the comments down below. But if your best idea is to do Gwenpool plus Wong, that tells me that there's just not many good combos for Gwenpool, okay? Because that combo is not a good idea. Now, as I mentioned, with her being a setup card, you do need to play the buff cards to see the value. Even if you did like Wong and Gwenpool, and you added plus 12 power to cards in your hand, but you're only able to play like one of those cards, well, you're not really getting plus 12, okay? Maybe you see like plus 2 or plus 4 power. If you can't play the cards, or if you draw her on turn 6 or 7 if it's a 7-turn game, then she's just a 4/6. Okay, if you play Gwenpool on the last turn of the game, she is simply a 4/6, and that's it. That kind of sucks. And then again, she does have RNG on the targets. If the more cards you have in your hand, the more risky it is, right? The lower the odds of hitting the desired cards you want. So she may hit cards that you don't plan to play. Now you're in an awkward situation. Do you play the cards you were originally going to play, or do you play the ones that you didn't really want to, but they got this plus 2 power, right? It makes it weird. And this is just my friendly reminder that if you're liking this video, to go ahead and give it a like, give it that thumbs up, and subscribe to the channel if you have not already, because we cover every single new card release in Marvel Snap. Okay, so let's talk about Gwenpool's floor and ceiling. This is her reasonable worst and her reasonable best. Now, the worst you will see her is that she's not really doing anything special, okay? Whether you play Gwenpool on turn 6 or you play her earlier but you don't end up playing the cards that she's adding power to, well, she's just a 4/6, okay? That is her floor. You know, it's not the worst floor. It's still just 6 power. That's kind of okay. It's kind of viable. You would obviously never choose to put that in your deck, and it's definitely not competitive. So, you know, it's kind of weak. It's not the worst floor we've talked about, though. In terms of her ceiling, it's that on reveal, add plus 2 power to 3 great targets, okay? Whether it's 3 different cards that you all want to play, or maybe one specific card like Sebastian Shaw, and it just hits like 3 times, okay? Whatever you want her hit, she's hitting, and you're playing all the cards. So you're at least getting the plus 6 power, right? This is at least effectively a 4/12, and a 4/12 is very good. A 4/12 sounds very nice, and it may be more. Again, if she did hit Sebastian Shaw, he's giving himself extra power. If it hit, you know, Mysterio or Brood, they're getting extra value. So it's 4/12, possibly more, okay, with a ceiling. Now, I'm not really convinced that this is overpowered, okay? It really doesn't seem that crazy when we think of the ceilings of some other cards. Like, we've got Sage over here, who's a 3-cost card, and Sage can blow past 12 power, right? I mean, it's like, come on. So I don't think this is actually an insanely overpowered ceiling. It would be very strong if, you know, Gwenpool could do this every time. I think on average, though, she's getting kind of close. I think on average, she's adding plus 2 power to 3 cards in your hand, and you're playing at least 2 of them, okay? So maybe, you know, she adding plus 2 power to the card you end up playing on turn 5, and the card you end up playing on turn 6. Now, obviously, if you do play the third one, or if she gave, you know, maybe plus 4 to your turn 5 play and plus 2 to turn 6, then she would be a 4/12. I think on average, though, we can expect a 4/10, right? If you play her on turn 4, it's 4/10 or 4/12. Maybe you didn't draw her or play her until turn 5, so you can't get everything out. It might be 4/6 or 4/8 at that point. On average, I think we can expect a 4/10, and this is, well, average. I mean, we have 4/10s in the game. This is a potentially 4/10, potentially worse, potentially better, but I think on average it's about the same. So it's really not anything new or crazy. It's kind of just average. Now let's jump into the 3 decks that I have put together for Gwenpool. First up, we have a Good Cards Blink deck, okay? Now, I mentioned before how, you know, Wong is a total trap. I also think just really heavy shenanigans is a total trap. Like, if you're planning to build a deck around Gwenpool, I think that deck is going to fall flat very fast, okay? It's going to be inconsistent. It's not going to be worth the payoff, right? She just doesn't add that much power. Her ceiling isn't big enough to build around. So I said, okay, let's just put her in a deck where we're happy that she can get to like a 410, right? Sometimes maybe 412. Just happy to have a 410. Good cards deck. Good cards deck, like just good stats. So here, turn 4, you're looking to either Jubilee, and then you can, like, Jubilee into Blink is ideal. If you don't have Jubilee, you can just go for Gwenpool. Maybe she adds, extra power to your Claw. You now play a 5-6 Claw. Maybe you play a 6-7 Doctor Doom. All of those cards are still under Shang-Chi range, but Gwenpool is effectively a 4-10. So I really like this home. It's already a good deck. Whether Gwenpool makes this deck better or not is a different question, right? We have to think, is this deck good for Gwenpool? Is Gwenpool good for this deck? You may have two different answers. So even if this is potentially one of Gwenpool's best homes, this deck may be better without her. My second deck is another good cards deck. This time it's a bit on the cheaper side. We are looking at a good cards Ravana list. Okay, now this is something that just hits. What's nice here is Gwenpool does have very nice synergy with Mysterio. Remember, if she's given Mysterio +2 power, it's given the original Mysterio and the clones all +2. So total, that's +6 power that Gwenpool would be hitting it with. That's awesome, okay? And it could trigger multiple times and give even more than that. You've also got Iron Man that could be a nice target. Really, the only danger here is that if Gwenpool does hit Sage or Iron Man with +2 power, then they no longer get the Ravana discount. Okay, so that's a bit of the danger. You really gotta, kind of pilot it. But there are some games where you obviously just don't draw Ravana, and in that case, Gwenpool might help you still get good value out of this Iron Man. And then last up, I have this power up Surfer list. So this is really building upon the deck that I had made for Fastos. Okay, I'd put together this power up list, and I said, okay, Fastos is powering up cards in our deck, whether he's giving them plus power or minus cost. Okoye powers up cards in our deck. We can use Absorbing Man to copy these abilities if we want, like Fastos into Absorbing Man. We've got Forge to power up the next card we play, and we've just got good targets in here, right? If we end up buffing Brood, that's extra value. Buffing Sebastian Shaw, that's extra value. Buffing Gladiator, that's good value, because now he's more likely to kill whatever card he brings out from your opponent's deck. You can also obviously do Brood into Absorbing Man. If they're all buffed up, you get some crazy numbers. And now we have Gwenpool. Okay, so Gwenpool's a 4-cost card. She's not getting the buff from Silver Surfer, but she might help buff up a lot of these other cards. So whether cards in your hand or in your deck, you've just got multiple tools to give it some kind of buff. I think this is probably the closest we have to this kind of power-up archetype. I'm not sure you can really make it happen without Surfer, because Brood, Shaw, and Gladiator all like these kinds of things, and Fastos is also a 3-cost card. So again, we'll see if this deck actually becomes better with Gwenpool, or if it's just a place where Gwenpool can fit. So here is a look at the Pandart Studio variant for Gwenpool, that if you do buy the Season Pass to unlock Gwenpool, you will get this variant once you hit level 50 on that Season Pass track. It's honestly pretty good variant. Okay, we got some really nice new artwork coming out in Spotlights this month. In terms of being fun, I think Gwenpool's okay. I view her mostly as a stat stick. I think you're mostly should just plan to play her to get, just a 410 or potentially 412. But there is the possibility that she does more. There's the possibility that you're playing her to buff up that Shaw extra times, or the Mysterio, right? Or maybe this kind of hand buff archetype. So she's a bit more fun than a normal stat stick, but I don't think it's that much more fun than a normal stat stick. I think she's okay. In terms of being flexible, again, I think it's okay. If you do treat her as a 410, you could reasonably put that in many decks, but you want to play her right on turn 4, because the longer you wait, the worse it is, the harder it is to get value from that investment. So you can't have her in a deck that already has a set play on turn 4. In terms of being competitive, yeah, I think she's okay. Again, I think Gwenpool is very average. To me, her power level is very mid. Now, if you think of some combo, something I'm missing, again, please let me know, okay? I'm always willing to hear it. I read all the comments. Let me know if there's something crazy I'm missing. But if the best thing we can come up with as a community for Gwenpool is to just play her on Wong and hope we have Sebastian Shaw and or Brood Mysterio in hand to get extra buffs, and it's not even guaranteed because it's random which cards in your hand she hits, I don't think there's much there, okay? I don't think she does anything crazy. I don't think she takes over the meta. I think you play her right when you get her because she's new, and then you play her on the weekend for the weekend missions, and then she sits in your collection. Now, while I don't have great opinions of Gwenpool, my recommendation is to get her. We have just learned a very valuable lesson this past month where Gilgamesh released and he seemed very weak. He wasn't seeing much play, and people weren't using him. And Second Dinner buffed him before his season was even over. If Gwenpool is too weak or her play rate is deemed too low by Second Dinner, she might get buffed. If she does get buffed and you passed on her, you might regret it a little bit. But the bigger case here is that she is just with the Season Pass, and the Season Pass is the best use of spending real money in Marvel Snap. If you decide to spend any real money on the game, Season Pass gives you the most resources, the most bang for your buck. And now with the Gilgamesh precedent, that if the card doesn't seem that exciting, they might just buff it right away. This just makes it all the more enticing, even though I think as of now, Gwenpool seems very mid, okay? I could always be wrong. Let me know your thoughts on Gwenpool. Let me know if you think I'm wrong or if you agree that you're not really seeing too much potential in her. Let me know in the comments down below. And until then, stay positive. I'll see you next time.